Mr. Green,
I'm here.
Mr. Lyda,
Here.
Dr. Middlebrooks,
Here.
Mr. Murphy,
Here.
Mr. Posey,
Here.
Mr. Shaw,
Here.
Mr. Smith.
Most of them, yes, ma'am. Now, we will go with the invocation.
And let us pray. Lord, we thank you for such a beautiful Easter Sunday. We come to you refreshed and ready to do your will. Thank you for promising to be with us always. We offer to you now the prayers and the hearts of all present here tonight, and we pray especially for our military and their families and their sacrifices they make for our freedom. We ask that you would bestow your wisdom and guidance upon this mayor and city council in this meeting tonight and in their daily service to this city. In your name we pray, amen.
Salute and pledge.
I'm open for a motion on the minute. Move to approve the minutes without reading. Have a motion? Second. Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. First in the report section, we have a proclamation for Donate Life Month. Mayor?
Whereas one of the most meaningful gifts that a human being can bestow upon another is the gift of life, and whereas 34,771 candidates on the nation's organ transplant waiting list received a life-saving or life-enhancing organ transplant in 2017, of those, 501 received an organ transplant in Alabama. And whereas a new patient is added to the national waiting list for an organ transplant every 10 minutes, 20 individuals die each day waiting for an organ transplant. And whereas nearly 100,864 men, women, and children are currently on the national waiting list for organ transplantation, of which approximately 2,512 are on Alabama's list. And whereas 5,430 candidates on the national waiting list died waiting for an organ transplant, which did not come in time. Of those, 191 were on Alabama's waiting list. Whereas the Alabama Organ Center is the nonprofit independent organ recovery organization dedicated to the recovery of high-quality organs and tissues for transplantation therapy. Whereas the city of Hoover, Alabama supports the Alabama Organ Center's life-saving mission, now therefore, I, Frank B. Picado, Mayor of the city of Hoover, Alabama, do hereby proclaim April 2018 as National Donate Life Month. In Hoover, we honor all who have given the gift of life. We focus our efforts on the extreme need for organ and tissue donors, and we encourage residents to designate their donation decision and share the decision to donate with family members. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and cause the seal of the city of Hoover to be affixed the 2nd day of April, the year of our Lord, 2018.
I just have to say, oh, okay, I'm pretty loud, I probably don't need the mic. I just wanted to say thank you so very much to the mayor, the council, and everyone in the city of Hoover for proclaiming April Donate Life Awareness Month. My name's Jan Jones, and I am actually a double organ transplant recipient myself. So this is very personal and near and dear to my heart. You heard all of the staggering numbers of the people waiting, the people that are dying every day on that list. So to encourage you all to be organ transplant donors and to designate that on your license is so very vital to continue this circle of life for the people that are waiting. I went into kidney failure after a lifelong battle of type 1 diabetes. And so with lots of complications from that disease, I ended up in total renal failure, but when I did get that call from the Alabama Organ Center, they said they found a match. Not only did I get a kidney that saved my life, but I also received a pancreas. So I have a pancreas that produces insulin. I am standing here no longer suffering from type 1 diabetes. As long as these organs continue to work, it has been a miracle of total healing for me. And that is what transplantation does for people. So I can't thank you enough, and I want to leave you with this one thought. If you replace the I in illness with we, it becomes wellness. And together, we can really change lives by being aware and advocating for transplantation. Thank you.
Next, we have a presentation by Porter White Investment Advisors. This is a consultant group Mayor brought to the council to talk about financial opportunities, disadvantages. Mr. Mayor, do you have anything you'd like to say going into the presentation?
Yes, good evening.
One other thing, the council may have questions at the end of this. Any other participation will occur in the regular comment section of the meeting. The advisors will be sticking around should anybody have any questions at that point. Thank you.
When we were entering the fiscal 2007 budget process, looking at those numbers, I think you guys are aware, we started looking at those. I was concerned looking at some of the expenses, looking at the revenue projections, what was happening. So in talking with the mayor and Alan, we decided that it might be good to hire an objective outside consultant to take a look at our finances. Basically, they looked particularly at 10 years back, but even went further, and we hired Porter White in order to undertake a projection kind of forward that would look at our revenues up through 2022. And so they are here tonight to give a summary of that report and presentation. So I'm going to introduce Jim White.
Thank you, Melinda. I'm chairman of Porter White and Company. Bill White, who is with me, is the president. I'm going to introduce the presentation, and Goodlow is going to do the heavy lifting. He talks faster than I do, so it'll take less time. As Melinda said, about midway through last year, we were retained by the city of Hoover to do a 5-year plan. And that decision was motivated by difficulties that the city was encountering in putting together a budget for fiscal 2018. We were asked to take a look at the history, see what the particular problems were faced during the budget process, and then to try to look forward to see where current trends might, if continued, might lead Hoover from a financial point of view. Now, as a firm, we've tracked the Birmingham Hoover MSA economy for many years, and we're engaged in doing forecasts and projections on all sorts of things very frequently. I want to tell you that we think we're proud of our work, we're confident in it, we think it's a solid basis for you all to move forward and make decisions, but we're not perfect, and I don't know anybody who is. In other words, I think these are good numbers, but they're not perfect numbers, and events like a recession or something like that could overtake us all at some point in the future. Now, next, okay. In front of you and in your books is a table of contents. And we actually indexed the particular slides that are shown there. And the order of our presentation is roughly as follows. We're going to look at historical and projected operating results. We're going to try to explain some of the recent adverse financial consequences that have occurred with specific numbers. We're going to analyze expenses. We're going to analyze revenues, and we're going to look in detail at the sales tax, sales and use taxes, which account for 65% of your revenues, and are very important. Now, this slide isn't directly relevant to Hoover, and it's not found in book dislocation. It's a few pages over. But it's very important as background to understanding what's been going on. If you look at it carefully, you will know that jobs in the Birmingham Hoover MSA have not yet recovered from where they were before the Great Recession. Jobs result in money, income, disposable income, sales, tax revenues, and particular retail sales. So, and this area, unfortunately, has been lagging behind the United States and lagging behind metropolitan statistical areas in the Southeast. So it is there's no avoidance of some dampening effect on Hoover's revenues. And I want to emphasize that because you don't control everything that goes on around here. You are subject to external forces that you can do nothing about. So that's sort of the background for some of the negative stories that we have to tell.
Go ahead.
This is my last slide, and it's really the conclusion of our presentation. This slide is history through 2017, and it's our forecast 2018 through 22. You'll note that our forecast continues the trend, the recent trend through 2017. One of those years is your budget year 2018, and the others follow behind. Now, cash flow during the Great Recession, which is the shaded section, did not go below zero, as it is expected to do in 2018. It increased to a recent high in 2015, and then declined to a little above break even in 2017. 2018 forecasted deficit. You would be drawing on your reserves to balance the budget. And we anticipate a continued drawdown of reserves unless you make some changes of some sort. Now, it's important to understand that break-even financial performance for Hoover is not enough. Those surpluses in the prior year weren't just socked away or lost. They were used on important capital expenditure projects and programs for the city. And without those projects, the quality of life and the quality of municipal services will decline. So whatever steps you take, or whatever good or bad luck happens to occur in the future, there is a need to have positive cash flow so Hoover can reinvest in itself going forward. And now I'm going to ask Goodloe to continue the presentation.
This next slide, I don't expect you to be able to read the numbers on the screen. I more put it up there to emphasize that we've looked at a lot of data and a lot of trends going back over a long period time to try to look forward into the future 5 years. All this is in your handouts. There are a few things that I did want to point out. First, that's not quite in the right place, but revenues actually declined from 2016 to 27, modest in 2018. So if you're someone trying to predict the future, where you have a past of growth, but a recent history of a trend line that's not as good, that gives you pause for thought. So you want to look at the factors that go into that. The second is, and you can't really see the bottom line, but you can at least see the color. In the past, you see green and yellow. And the yellow numbers in the Great Recession in 08, 09 were actually greater, as in they were closer to zero, but they were greater than the amount that you actually experienced in 2017. And then, of course, the red numbers are what's going forward, which imply a negative. And with just this projection, it implies that the general fund balance would decline from 32 million to 10 million over the time period if no other changes in expenses or revenues were made. All right, another slide with a lot of numbers. This goes back to my point where we're looking at the changes from 2017 to 2018. I think the big number that stands out is that for the first time outside of a recession, you saw a decline in sales and use tax. We ultimately set a growth assumption of about 1.6%. This is about equal to our assumption for inflation. That's very important because as inflation grows, products get more expensive, the same sales tax rate applied to that generates more revenue. But ultimately, if you look at the total tax revenues growing at about 1.92%, with other sources about 1.8%. All of this, of course, is a faster growth rate than just the recent budget history. And we've looked at trends over the recent past and tried to come up with those numbers. The flip side of it is expenses. What has been going on with the expenses in the aggregate? Two primary are personnel and operating expenses. The personnel expenses that we used in our forecast are based on existing approved positions without any increase or decrease, adjusted for inflation, and step raises anticipated under existing policies. So in essence, the status quo. The operating expenses include no new programs or increases based on historical trends over recent years. And ultimately, this is the crux of the matter. If you look at the total expense increase at 3.19%, compare that to a revenue increase of 1.85%, you have a difference of 1.34, which is really what leads us to the red part and an increasing structural deficit over time. And so this chart is just a blow up of what you saw on the previous page. So I promise to get away from so many numbers and maybe look at a few more pictures going forward. But what I first want to do is explain the deficits to remind us what's happened in the recent, and then delve into expenses and revenues more. So what is diagrammed here is the change in revenues and expenses from fiscal year 16 to 17. In 2016, the city authorized additional approved permanent positions, which impacted the 2017 numbers because it takes time to hire people. The city experienced additions to the expense from the opening of the Finley Center and also on the related bond issue in 2016. There was also an increase in contributions to the school board, a total of $5 million. That was a net increase of about 2.5. And then there was that revenue decrease that we saw in the numbers. So I wanted to go just a little detail on the first three items. This is a table of all the employees by department in the city of Hoover. Tracks the full-time authorized positions. You'll notice the increase of 22 people from 2015 to 2018. 11 of those were in public safety, and all of those were part of the budgeting process. Our projections going forward include no new positions or no changes in this. And then the next part is the impact of the Finley Center. I've highlighted two numbers in red that relate to the previous slide, which is the city support for the Finley Center, which you see with $1.2 million in 2017. And what is included here is the projection of what that is going forward, increasing to $1.69 million in 2022. 2. And then there's the debt service that is knowable. It's fixed at 2.7 million going forward. So those are the numbers that are used in the projections there. Next, looking at expenses, we did not take an in-depth bottom-up look at all the expenses of the city. But what we did want to do was look at the expenses in context, see if anything stood out to us. So what you see here is a graph of personnel expenses per capita. And since we're looking at long periods of time, we need to adjust for inflation. So when I say nominal, that means historically those are the dollars that were reported and what they were in the city financial statements. But we need to adjust that for inflation because a dollar today is worth less than a dollar 10 years ago. And that's what we call the real value that you can actually spend. And what you'll notice is if we take from the peak in 2007, that expenses on a per capita basis have returned to where they were. There were cuts, so you've had population growth, you've had some personnel growth recently, but that really has only returned you to where you were on a real basis, adjusted for inflation 10 years ago. The same thing is about true for operating expenses per capita, and you can basically see a similar trend. If you look at the maximum of what they were in 2008, you have returned to that basis based on inflation-adjusted dollars. So if we look at the city of Hoover population per employee, population of Hoover divided by the number of employees by the city, has increased steadily. So what that means is you have the same number of people providing services to more citizens of Hoover. You do see the recent decline in that based on the changes in the last few years. So just to summarize the expense part of this, we don't see anything that sticks out as having a lot of growth. We see a return to where you were prior to the Great Recession. Next, let me look at revenues. We looked at revenues in a lot of detail in the history. We broke revenues out by different categories. Some of the smaller dollar items we lumped together. And it's important to note that even though we projected these revenues on a straight line, life never goes in a straight line, and certainly finances don't. So they can be higher or lower, but we're really looking at what is a 5-year growth rate you should track. If there's a booming economy more than expected, should be higher. If we go into a recession at some point in the next 5 years, we should expect it to be lower. But this is sort of a 50-50 forecast. Chances to be above and below or about equal. But given the current trends in the Birmingham-Hoover metropolitan area economy, we don't think that the actual results will be materially better than those forecasts. Now this pie chart just highlights all of the sources of revenue and the breakdown. As previously said, sales and use tax is 65% of your revenue. And so that's the one we look at most carefully. It's important to remember that sales tax is more sensitive to economic conditions. For example, from 2007 to 2009, Hoover sales tax and use tax declined by about 10%. So if we look at the general fund revenues similar to expenses on a per capita basis, what we actually see here is, and we're going back further to 1997, so this is a 20-year period, we really haven't seen any growth in revenues on a per capita basis. We see sort of a step decline during the Great Recession, and maybe only modest growth from 2009 to 2017. So the revenue growth on a per capita basis hasn't been keeping up with the growth in the population. And since 65% of revenues are sales and use tax, we wanted to give a little more consideration to that and the trends there. This is a graph showing sales and use tax history back to, I don't know if anyone can remember, 1981 and about $1 million in sales tax collection. Certainly Hoover has come a long way and a lot of good things have happened in that time period. The gray bars there are recessions. Sales tax actually grew during the previous 2 two recessions up until the Great Recession, but we did see that marked decline. And it's important that retail sales in Hoover, measured on this per capita basis, have been and remain far in excess of similar numbers for Alabama, Jefferson County, the city of Birmingham, and likely more jurisdictions in the state. So Hoover has been a destination shopping. People come to Hoover to shop. They don't just live here, but they come. And a lot of the developments that have happened over certainly this time period. But we've seen growth slow in recent years. So this graph is more of a zoom in, looking at the last 15 years. The dotted line is actually a 3-year average moving trend. You notice that there's been more volatility in the year-to-year change in sales and use tax. And the recovery from the Great Recession was not as steep. And actually, if you notice, the sales and use tax started to decline before the recession. So I don't know if it's a leading indicator of it or something else was going on. We try to compare to Hoover to the state and the nation, just like we did for jobs. The red line is U.S. personal consumption. So personal consumption should drive spending and sales tax. And you can see that rate of growth. And the green line is on the bottom, and you see that for Alabama as a whole, at least for the time period since 2009, Hoover has grown faster. But if I look at sort of a recent trend, drawing that line in there, we see a slowdown from the trend line of what was very good in coming out of the recession to what goes on recently. And why did I pick 2014? You should always ask that question if someone shows you a trend line, why did it start? And I think it is combined with this next slide. There's been a lot of discussion of e-commerce, retail sales, and the importance of that is you don't collect sales tax on e-commerce and online sales. Now, the state does collect some of it. They by no means collect sales tax on all of it. So you immediately, any dollar sale that moves online, you lose some of that revenue. And then the amount that the state collects is below the level of sales tax in the city of Hoover. So there's a further loss there. And then the state allocates that based on population. So if you are a shopping destination that has more retail sales per capita than everywhere else in the state, an allocation based on population is going to further erode your sales tax collection. And so what we noticed is, and this is total sales online. So there's no breakout urban, rural. This is just a total national figure, the best numbers we have. There's a certain rate of growth implied by that line, which in 2014 seemed to take off a little more. And the importance of this is, if you just look from 2016 to 2017, there was almost a 1% increase in the amount of sales moved online. And so that is a direct headwind to Hoover sales tax growth. And we tried to estimate dollars, could be the order of magnitude of $5 million per year. But the importance is we're projecting sales tax to grow at the rate of inflation. But we have this headwind, which is as more and more move online, there's less directly affecting the impact of growth of Hoover's sales tax collections. So finally, if I move back to this slide showing the general fund, I just want to reiterate that there's a deficit, but we don't start at zero as the anchor, because this projection of the general fund doesn't include any allegation of capital expenditures. Approximately $10 million is the figure used for what capital reserve needs might be. So that projected funding gap is closer to $18 million by 2022. And all of this is based on recent trends, the data that we've done, and all the other macro factors that we looked into. So if there aren't any additional questions at this time, that would conclude our report.
I've got just a couple for the rest of the council. How is the tax, first, the use of the term discretionary funds versus the general fund? How is that term broken out compared to the general fund of capital?
So in essence, that bottom line number is well, almost directly the projected change in fund balance.
So,
So it hasn't included any capital expenditures that you might make this time, so it's on that basis.
but it encompasses the entire general fund?
Yes.
If you're familiar with the transfer we do at the end of the year to the capital projects fund from the general fund, that's what this would represent.
Next, in your studies, use of sales tax in comparing Hoover to other communities. Not all communities have the same sales tax rate. So how are you using that comparing with the city of Hoover versus other communities in the Birmingham metro area?
So what we've looked at is retail sales on a per capita basis,
Just gross sales.
gross sales. So you would apply the rate, assume everyone shopped in only their own locality.
Any other questions from the council?
Yes, Mr. President. So in essence, what you're telling us, Mr. White, is that we have 1% growth in our revenues, 3% growth, I'm rounding, in our expenditures each year.
I would, it's closer to 1%, 2%, so 1.3% was about the difference in expenses growing higher than revenue.
So we're outpacing in expenditures, revenues, because of, and I'm looking at page 12 here, because of personnel, Finley Center, debt service associated with the 2016 warrant issuance and a school contribution. Is that correct? Those are what led to these factors of outpacing.
That set the baseline for 2016 to 2017. Then certain expenses like debt service, projections,
Fluctuating.
those are already there and those are contractually committed.
I guess my next question is for you, Dr. Lopez.
We have a baseline of fixed expenses such as debt service and any expenditures to which you are committed, which are policy. The problem, in addition to that, we have a difference in the going forward in the difference between expenses growing and revenues growing. And that's why the situation is getting worse from where it was in 2017.
Dr. Lopez, when we decide as a council or as a city to take on a new expense, let's say a large expense, a capital expense, something like that, do we look at projections as to how that is going to impact our budgets moving forward?
I can speak to the processes we currently have in place, and so let's just take capital projects, for instance. When we request capital projects from department heads, one of the items we also request are what would be the additional operating cost if we put this in place? And that way, we can consider the impact that it would be on operating before those decisions were made.
And that's current administration.
Yes.
So can anyone tell me how it was done prior to the current administration? When we decided to take on an expense, did we look at the long-term costs and how that was going to impact our budget moving forward?
I can't necessarily speak to the decisions at that time. I do know we did try to collect that information, but I cannot personally speak to what went into those decisions.
Okay, thank you. One more question for you, Mr. White. In the original presentation, that was more of a deep dive that we had a while back, there were 3 projections on there. You had three lines coming out from the end. Worst case scenario, median, and best case scenario. This one here that we're looking at today, is that the median?
Yeah, that was the 50/50.
Okay.
So should be equally likely to go above or below.
Right.
And so sometimes what you try to do is, life is never a straight line. You might want to capture a range that would hit 90% of likely cases. So there's some statistical techniques you can use to try to do that.
Very good, that's all my questions, Mr. President.
Anything else from the council?
I have a couple questions. On the personnel, increase, or when it talks about revenue expense changes, and it goes over the 4 items, it lists personnel increase. I know that we, in addition to the, contribution to the schools, we also, worked SROs into this might be more a question for Dr. Lopez. We worked SROs into the city budget. Is that quantified in this personnel cost here? Where is that quantified? Because commonly what we use, we say we increased it to $5 million contribution to schools when we took on the expense of the SROs, which was about $2.5 million, something like that. Where does that factor in all this?
What you see, sorry, I'm not on the right page.
Yeah.
Okay, keep in mind, this change was from fiscal 16 to fiscal 17. So you're talking about the additional contribution to the schools?
Well, I'm talking about when the city took on the SRO expense.
Oh, okay, yes.
As employees.
Okay, so basically, we always had that expense on our books. What changed was the revenue. So the revenue decreased by that amount.
So there was another revenue line that
Sure.
changed. I guess another thing another personal question, this might be for a little bit everybody. Is anything, we just predicted the projections for personnel growth were a steady state, right? Just kind of standard. There's the personnel study, salary study, none of that's factored in with any of this.
That is correct. There are no new positions or anything like that in this, but the growth rate is actually somewhat lower percentage than even what we've experienced the last 2 years.
Okay. And then I guess the last question is, if you add up those discretionary funds that Beth was talking about, over like 2010, I've lost the slide here, but 2010 to 2018, something like that, those add up to roughly $75 million. So was all that money spent? Is it encumbered? Do we have surely not, it wasn't all spent. So do we have a list of where that money is and what the balances are and how much of it is encumbered in a project, or how does that work? I think that's important to understand, because that's the first thing that jumps out to me is we're at the state now, but there was huge surpluses in the last few years. Where did all that money go?
So a couple of things. All of the money from transfers has been allocated to capital projects except a little over $4 million. So I'm talking specifically about the capital projects fund. The report that I send to you guys monthly, there's a capital projects report. So that shows you what the balance of those funds are within each project. And other than that balance, the rest of it has been spent on other capital projects over that time period.
So that answers the question where those surpluses went.
Yes.
So there's really a certain amount of money that's been built up. Obviously, it's tied to capital projects that are near to everybody's heart. But there's, other than the 32 million reserve, or 30-ish million reserve, there's also that money too. That's set aside for capital projects that people expect.
Set aside, a lot of it's encumbered already, and then a lot of it's contractually encumbered.
Matching funds and things like
Sure.
that. All right, cool, thank you.
Mr. President, I have one question. I was hoping Mr. Yeager was here tonight, but I don't see him, so I'm going to ask you, Dr. Lopez. I understand that this study really shouldn't be a huge surprise to anyone in the city. But my understanding is Mr. Yeager did a similar study and presented it, his findings, and it was pretty close to what Porter White found, if not slightly worse. Can you tell me when that study was done and when he presented that to the administration?
I cannot.
Mr. Price? Mayor, do you know?
I spoke with Mr. Yeager today, and I don't know when he conducted his studies. I know that there are some council members that have provided that. I know I haven't received. But in previous years, for whatever reasons, previous councils were never given any documentation having to do with that.
Do you know if the mayor was?
I believe that the mayor was given the information, and I would have to think probably the president in document form or in writing for whatever reasons. And I'm not gonna fault him for that. I would probably fault both of you guys.
Mr. President, if I may, I'm going to ask you a question. I think the next logical question to ask, Mr. Rice, Mr. Mayor, what is our next step? Because you're facing a situation, as are we, as are the people of Hoover, where expenditures are outpacing revenues. And obviously, something needs to be done, so I'm sure that you've thought a lot about it. Could you share with us what you think our next step needs to be?
Well, number one, I thought it's very important that our citizens hear this. The sky is not falling, but we have some issues. I think they've been presented very well here tonight that we have to address. And so, I've worked and spoken with each one of you about this. You've all had the report for, I'm gonna guess about 6 weeks. And so over the next 2 weeks, I'm gonna continue to work with each of you to address this. And I think, I feel comfortable in saying in 2 weeks, we can come back with some type of recommendation for the council to look at and move on.
Mayor, are you looking for the council to react in 2 weeks or just to be informed?
No, I think that, I feel comfortable saying that we can have a recommendation for you to look at and then act on it following me. But, you know, just to make it perfectly clear, we started working on this deficit November of 2016 when we came on board. And just addressing how everything from our insurance that our employees get, formulas that we use to the vehicles that we purchase. And so, and even today, we're working hard and our employees have been incredible. Our department heads have been working very hard to help us satisfy this budget. We have a number of positions that are not filled. We're doing the things that I think are important for us to do as city leaders, and that's look at our house and make sure we have it in order. And we're going to continue to do that. And those are some of the things that we'll talk about in the next 2 weeks.
Mr. President, if I may ask one more question. I understand the separate meetings, but I'd like to ask you, Mr. Lyon, as Finance Chair, I think this is a better vehicle to have a Finance Committee meeting to discuss these options as a body and to look at a recommendation to bring forward to the council. I realize it is the entire council, but to have sub-meetings, you mentioned the Yeager report. I want to make sure we're all looking at the same information and working together for a solution. That'd be possible.
That's a great recommendation. I appreciate it.
Dr. Lopez, I know in February's report, which is the last report we've been provided, we have seen some benefits from the actions that have been taken, and the fact that the revenues are a little bit ahead of anticipated revenue by about 1.2 million. The city has saved, I guess, largely through the hiring freeze, close to 3 million between that projects that budgeted items that go unspent. In your opinion, are we on line for corrective action having taken place for the current fiscal year, and I think we're looking at 19 going forward? Or do you think these gains the city has made this fiscal year are going to turn around for the current government?
Well, first of all, regarding the revenue, we are slightly ahead. Most of that is due to use tax only. I feel like in the coming months, we will see some of that catch up. But yes, right now, we are ahead. As far as the expenditures, we have citywide, under the mayor's direction, undertaken and try to really cut back on what we're spending, even more than the $4 million we cut for this budget. And we are a little bit ahead there as well. However, keep in mind, we have to come up to almost $3.5 million just to break even. And at this rate, I'm not sure we're gonna be able to meet that at the end of the fiscal year. And if we didn't, this would be the first fiscal year we ever actually had to make a transfer to balance the general fund. We budgeted it, but we've never actually had to effectuate it. And once that happens, that means we have no additional funding to transfer to capital projects, and that fund will be depleted very quickly. And it makes the 2019 budget very hard to balance without additional cuts, but beyond what we've already cut.
But we do have time to make sure that we're methodical going forward, and not rushed rapid decisions as far as this fiscal year.
I think, and you guys have seen the numbers, I think it's one of those things that the longer you wait, then the more it's gonna affect services to the citizens, and that would be a political decision.
Is it possible that the council could be provided a list of vacant positions currently, just so we can know?
Sure. Absolutely.
Anything else from, yes, sir?
Mr. President, if I can say one question, a couple questions and a comment. So I can be clear, the 1.3% outpacing expenditure revenue is based upon, is without capital, correct? Is that accurate? Comment was made earlier, 1.3% expenditures outpace revenue,
That's right.
excluding capital.
And no capital expenditure.
Okay, so, with that being said, capital, is defined as what? Just general, I mean, roads, what, roads, roofs, what are we talking about?
Capital in the general fund, this projection basically focused on the general fund. And the only way it affected capital projects is based on the transfer that would generate money to fund capital projects.
So, moving down the road a couple of years or so, we're below the zero mark, so there'll be no room for capital projects because we allocate money. So, again, capital projects equate to what, roads?
Okay, yes,
Okay,
roads, sidewalks, it would include, any type of, improvements for, I'm trying to think, the IT upgrade that we did this year, various vehicles. We did not approve any new vehicles in the fiscal 18 budget. Those kind of things catch up with you, so yes. Equipment, large equipment for public works, park maintenance.
and, Tim Reeves, give me a head shake or a yes or no on it. Typically, capital projects, especially dealing with building, that's a plan where you have to have some lead time, design, construction, 2 years ahead of time, so. When we're talking about time frame, if we know we have 45 square foot of Hoover, tons of roadside streets, whole 9 yards, where you adequately prepare, to create a plan for road improvements, you would need X number of lead time to know when these projects come about and know how they're gonna be funded, even matching funds, federal government. Is that an accurate statement?
That's correct.
Okay.
And can I speak to that 1 second? Just so you know, any project that's currently underway, we have funded whatever was submitted 100%. And the reason for that is should we experience, say, a recession, you never wanna have to come up with money in a down year. So we go ahead, because we're committed, we show the funding for that commitment.
Okay, and my last comment here, question, comment, public safety equates police, fire, what else? What are we talking about?
Communications,
911, whole 9 yards.
It also would be building inspections.
Okay, building inspection, engineering. All right. I know there's a chart, a slide put up there that showed that being a great number of people. I've always and will continue to be an advocate supportive of public safety. I want us to understand that Hoover continues to get accolades, top this, top that. And I think, Chief, so I'll be correct, so I can know these things. What is it, 60% of all fire calls are medical? That's correct. So we have a unique opportunity where we not only are putting funds into certain services, but we have a process that is not only effective, but is working. So the only thing that concerns me a lot, when I see this, exclude capital out of it for a second and let our roads and everything fall. Our services gets us to praise and all these insurance ratings and the entire 9 yards. I don't want any of our employees or community to feel like we're going to be in a situation where these things are going to go. That's why we're having these conversations right now to kind of see where we're at. What great government does, properly prepare and get ahead of the curve. So I want to kind of, I know a lot of cameras here. We're here talking now to look down the road, so I don't know what the headline's going to read. But we're getting ahead of the curveball to make sure we have the greatest fire police, roads, just the whole 9 yards, and have this discussion. That's it for me.
Mr. President, can I have a follow-up to that?
Well, it's a follow-up to
Mr. Murphy's
and then
public safety comment. Chief, this is really a question for you. I know as our population grows, of course, our number of calls and so forth will grow as well. But in the recent years, primarily due to the opioid crisis, have we seen an increase in medical calls that outpaces our population growth?
We have some increases.
You have in numbers.
We have some increases.
Mr. President, Dr. Lopez, you mentioned when you were speaking earlier about city services decreasing. At this time, do we have any problem with providing city services?
I think the city obviously has done a great job of delivering services, and we continue to do that. I think it's more of what are we not able to do, maybe new requests, new capital projects requests that are going to come that would be important to citizens. Also, in terms of funding positions, when we're not filling positions, what impact is that having on departments? Those types of things that we have to consider, so.
I understand. Just wanted to be sure there wasn't anything at this moment.
We are making sure that public safety is still occurring, and obviously any service we give, we try to do it 100%, so.
Thank you.
Mr. Shaw.
Yes, thanks, Mr. President. Just to wrap up very quickly, there's a little bit of a cognitive dissonance here because we're hearing that the sky is not falling and that things are being maintained, yet we have to make a decision in 2 weeks. Now, I understand we don't want to wait too long, but when we're talking, the elephant in the room here is tax increase. It's the tax increase or fee increase. I mean, because when you're talking numbers that big, that's really all we got. That's really an accurate analysis. So if we're talking about tax increase, I would hope that we would thoroughly look at what the implications are, because those are big numbers. That's tens of millions of dollars possibly coming out of our local economy, our local pockets, and I would hope that we have the time to really analyze and look at the facts and figures of what the implications of all the different options are going to be. For penny sales tax and for garbage fees, and for all these things, I would just hope that we don't rush into a politically expedient decision at the expense of the intelligent decision and a smart decision that's going to set us up for long-term success. That's all. Thank you, Mr. President.
One other thing before you start, Mr. Rice, and I don't know if this is Dr. Lopez or Mr. White or Mr. White question. In speaking speaking with Mr. Yeager earlier, it's my understanding that the Birmingham metro area, move Hoover, the Birmingham metro
haven't seen those numbers. I would be very interested in answering that question myself. I don't, we keep a database, tax collections, by the city of Birmingham and Jefferson County, now Hoover, going back to the 70s. I'd be very surprised if that were true, but I can't say it's not.
Jefferson County has converted the education bond penny to other uses. Birmingham is 10%. A number of communities are 10%. Is that part of the reason why?
Let me go back to Andy's prior question. One of the first things I did is look at Birmingham, see the Birmingham CAFR, to see what their year-to-year sales tax, and I did notice the increase. I would love to delve in and get the same level of information that's provided by the city of Hoover to better understand the city of Birmingham's situation. What I do know is that there's quite a concentration in the summer. So, whereas you're more broad, your base here, so you might expect a little more year-to-year volatility or change in that number. I think the headwinds are the same to the extent that the city of Birmingham is a shopping destination. It's basically similar headwind. I have not looked at longer-term trends for the city of Birmingham to compare that to the city.
One of the things you need to look at is when sales tax abatements come off. And my immediate question is some of the sales tax abatement come off during this period?
Question?
You got to follow up to that.
No, I think that was. All right.
Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
Mr. White, while you're up there, as far as the federal, recent federal tax cuts, which the board at least made a difference in state home pay, so to speak, is that accounted for in your numbers?
So what we saw with the federal situation was primarily a deduction in corporate tax rates, which would benefit working population. Go back to this slide. It was one time, businesses that I've talked to, they tried to make it a one-time bonus, so I would hope there's some one-time increase. We're projecting over a 5-year period. And so it remains to be seen if that will have a significant impact on the dollars at the level that we're talking about.
Too soon to tell, so to speak.
Anything else from the council? If not, we'll get about our business and then we'll come back. Mr. Chase, I'm sorry, Mr. Rice.
Couple things that I hope clarify some of the previous questions. To Dr. Middlebrook's question about Mr. Yeager and his work, we do owe it to him. We've invoked his name a lot tonight. We do owe it to him to say he is convalescing at home from surgery, or he certainly would be with us, and we are hopeful and anticipatory that he'll be able to join us as this dialogue goes forward. I know we all know what we meant when we had that discussion about previous years, but the work that he did and the question about whether it was or was not provided would have actually occurred in previous terms. So just, we know that, but just for the audience's sake. And secondly, and actually I was going to mention this, but Mr. Shaw asked the question about level of service. The term hiring freeze has been used a few times in conversation and in the media, and we are filling critical positions. Now, when you're a department head, every position is a critical position, and when you're the city administrator, it's debatable. But we have hired 911 operators, we've hired police officers, SROs specifically, and a few other positions that were deemed to be absolutely mission critical. In some cases, there's no redundancy for those positions, et cetera. Some of the things that are for summer programs that are actually funded by the revenue that they bring in, we've worked with that. So now the question is, what happens in the long term? One of the things that we added to the work that the Gallagher Group is doing, which is the salary and staffing survey, is that staffing component. To our knowledge, this is the first time the city has asked for comparative data about our staffing level. The early indications that we have is that we are not overstaffed in any area. It was an open question for us a year and a half ago. We just really didn't know. We didn't have the comparative data. But we do not believe,
I saw an interesting number specifically about law enforcement in our region last week, and it was illuminating. And so we do not think that we're gonna hear back from the Gallagher Group that we have too many employees in any category. Certainly not too many employees as a whole for our population and for our geography, distribution, public safety, et cetera. So hopefully those are helpful comments about this discussion about Mr. Yeager and his contributions, which are important, and also the discussion about city services. We think we're providing excellent service. We don't think that we're in a long-term proposition with what we're having to do with vacancies right now.
All right, thank you. Let's get our other business out of the way, and then we may end up coming back. Resolution 5792-18, Mr. Ford.
Invitation to bid for remount rescue unit body on cab chassis, bid number 18-002, were sent to 75 vendors listed on the City of Hoover vendor list. Bids were opened on Thursday, March 22nd, 2018. 3 bids were received. Bid from Southern Emergency Consultants LLC in the amount of $46,179.50 was the lowest responsible bidder, meeting all specifications and requirements. This bid is accepted, and the mayor is authorized to execute an agreement with the bidder for the services to be performed.
Move to approve resolution 579218.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any comments or questions from the council? Any from the audience? This is the recasting of a rescue unit that was involved in a wreck about a year ago. There's a state. We're dealing a lot with insurance providers. Anything from the audience? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Resolution 579318, Mr. Corley.
This resolution authorizes Mayor Frank V. Mercado to execute a Fourth Amendment to the antenna site lease schedule between Crown Castle DBA Pinnacle Towers LLC and the Hoover Police Department for public safety antennas at the Old Tower Road site.
Motion to approve resolution 579318.
Second.
Have a motion, second. Any comments or questions from the council? I think this is fairly self-explanatory. Anything from the audience? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Resolution 579418, Mr. Corley.
This resolution authorizes Mike Lewis, the Director of the city's Human Resources Department, or his designee, to execute a mutual confidentiality and non-disclosure agreement with BenefitFocus.com, Inc. in order to comply with HIPAA, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act 1996 concerning business associates. This resolution also authorizes the Director of Human Resources or his designee to execute any business associate agreement on behalf of the city in order to comply with HIPAA.
Motion to approve resolution 579418.
Second.
Motion, second. Any comments or questions from the council? Any from the audience? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Resolution 5795-18, Mr. Corley.
This resolution authorizes Mayor Frank V. Mercado or his designee to execute participating ambulance agreements with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Alabama.
Mr. President, I move to approve resolution 5795-18.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions from the council?
Mr. President, I'd like the clerk to note that I'll be abstaining on this vote, please.
Why did it abstain? This is basically gonna help assist our fire department when it comes to transport issues and Blue Cross. Anything from the audience? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. With one abstention. Resolution 5796-18, Mr. Corley.
This resolution authorizes Mayor Frank V. Mercado to execute an agreement with Credit Bureau Systems, Inc., DBA Ambulance Medical Billing, to provide ambulance billing services for the city of Hoover.
Motion to approve resolution 579618.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions from the council? This is going to allow the fire department to bring in a third party for billing and collection services that had been handled in-house, and the person or persons have retired. So now we need to bring in expertise. Anything from the audience? Anything from the council? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Resolution 5797-18, Mr. Corley.
This resolution amends the budget for fiscal year ending September 30, 2018, as set forth on the exhibit attached to the resolution.
President, move for approval of resolution 579718.
Second.
Have a motion second, Ms. Shaw, would you like to spend about 30 seconds on this issue?
I think we covered most of it in the work session, but it's basically eliminating money for a study for which we found other options to fund the data.
Any questions from the council? Any from the audience? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Next, we have second reading of ordinance 18-2362.
This ordinance rearranges, alters, and extends the city's corporate limits to include property owned by the Brook Highland Community Church, as shown on the map attached to the ordinance. This is phase one of a multi-stage annexation.
Mr. President, I move for the adoption of ordinance number 182362.
Second.
Have a motion and second. Any comments or questions from the council? Any from the audience? If not, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Green?
Aye.
Mr. Lydic?
Aye.
Mr. Marshall Middlebrooks?
Aye.
Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Mr. Posey?
Aye.
Mr. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye. Next, we have the first reading of ordinance number 18-2366. Mr. Porter.
This ordinance rearranges, alters, and extends the city's corporate limits to include property owned by the Brook Highland Community Church, as shown on the map attached to the ordinance. This is phase two of the multi-stage annexation.
Consideration for adoption is anticipated for the next council meeting, April 16th. Item 13 is first reading of ordinance 18-2363. It's my understanding that the mayor's office and staff have asked for a continuation. Is it to the call of the chair or to a date specific?
To the call, Chair.
Open, yes, we don't. Since it's being continued, the first reading will also be continued, so open for a motion to continue to the call of the chair.
Mr. President, I move for continuance of ordinance 18-2363 to call the chair. Second.
Have a motion, second. Any comments, questions from the council? Any from the audience? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Item 14 is first reading of ordinance 18-2367. Mr. Porter.
This ordinance provides for the levying of municipal ad valorem property taxes to be assessed by the city, which shall go into force and effect as of October 1st, 2018. These taxes shall be collected as usual by the tax assessors and collectors of Jefferson and Shelby County.
This is an ordinance that takes place about this time every year, and it provides for the funding for the next fiscal year. This is basically housekeeping in nature. Consideration for adoption shall occur at the next council meeting, April 16th. Next, we have first reading of ordinance 18-2368. Mr. Porter.
This ordinance modifies the municipal code of the city of Hoover to create the Hoover Arts Council for the purposes of advancing, promoting, advocating, and fostering the arts and arts culture, including but not limited to visual, performing, literary, culinary, and applied arts within the city of Hoover, and to serve as the direct liaison with the city council on matters concerning the arts. The mission of the Hoover Arts Council is to ensure that the goals and needs of city leadership and the citizens that they serve are being met, as such relate to the arts.
Second reading and consideration will be the next meeting, April 16th. Mr. President, do you have anything you'd like to bring forward tonight?
Yes, Mr. President, I just wanted to say this, this Arts Council ordinance is a response to a lot of community meetings, including future meetings, and also the survey. 60% of the people in the city said that they wanted to see us do more for arts and culture, and this is a response to that, and I'll do this again. 16th, I just want to thank everybody that was involved in that and came out and did our community meetings about it, and looking forward to getting to work with this group.
And if anyone has not seen this ordinance and would like to, start with it on the city website.
It's not, well, actually, it wasn't a packet.
Packet,
Posted
document,
it.
books.
I posted it.
If you don't have access, please let one of us know. Mr. Lyda, we have a few bills.
Yes, sir, a healthy stack this week, and I would move that be paid fully presented to us.
Second. Motion, second. Any comments or questions from the council?
Just something quick, earlier today, we had around the interviews for the
We're not ready
education.
for comments quite yet. We still paying a few people.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's all right. favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Now, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you so much. Earlier today, we had our round of interviews for the education appointment. We're planning to make that appointment on the 16th, so next council meeting at 6. Hopefully at 5:30, we have an education meeting to discuss that appointment to move forward. Other than that, thank you so much, sir.
We had anticipated having that vote tonight, but unfortunately, a number of weeks ago, the storms that were supposed to have occurred caused for the delay of the interviews, and thus the delay. But anything else from the council? All right, Dr. Lopez.
I failed to mention earlier that for anybody that wanted a copy of this presentation, there are copies available outside next to the agendas. We run out, I will take a list of anybody we can email, but in addition, tomorrow we will be putting it on our website along with the new comprehensive annual financial report that is now ready. So.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the audience? Quite interesting, Mr. Mayor. I guess it's sinking in. Well, one more chance for the council. Any activities coming up that we want to brag about? That's going to be last Saturday in April at Veterans Park. We'll talk about it again on 16. Hearing nothing else, I'm open for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A motion second, all in favor can leave.
One.